Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Antonio P., and I am here in the great city of Houston, Texas, and I am joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, two of my favorite people in the world, Dr. Kathy Collins and Dr. Lamar Hylton. And we're here for a conversation today on the changing landscape of higher education. And it's going to be a great ride for the next hour and a half. I'm sure this is going to be a difficult conversation for some. And as we were preparing for this just a few minutes ago, talking about some of the things we're experiencing, I think you all are going to enjoy the conversation. I want you to see the chat feature. You can ask questions of our panelists. There's a section of the broadcast where we'll be asking your questions. I have some prepared questions for them that we'll run through, but certainly please share with us your questions that you have. So a little bit before we begin, because I've gone all off of my script, I prepared this nice script and then I just winged it all the way to the right. We're gonna talk about some. Because we've got a lot, our audience is wide, and some of you are just wading into the higher education world, and I want you to know what a chief student affairs officer is and what they do. And so I'm gonna start with Kathy, and Kathy, talk to us a little bit about a chief student affairs officer.
Certainly, and thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today in what is a time we never thought we'd be in terms of higher education, one we never prepared for, didn't take classes on, and really in some ways are just figuring it out day to day, moment by moment as we do this. So for myself, I've been a vice president now for 4 years at the University of Rhode Island in Rhode Island, where we are the flagship Sea Grant land grant institution. This is my first vice presidency. Prior to this, I had the great opportunity to come up mostly in student affairs through housing. So did about 15 of my 25 years in housing, ranging in institutions from, Texas A&M to Michigan State and some other great stops in between, and have worked in conduct and orientation and student activities and assessment and athletics, and really spent some time preparing to be a vice president for student affairs. This was my goal, my dream. And now I have the great opportunity to work at an institution of about 18,000 students. We have an on-campus population of approximately 6,200. Right now we have an on-campus population of 130. And it's in finals, which we should not have. So as the vice president for student affairs, I do sit on the senior leadership team for the university. I'm a direct report to our president, who has served our university for the past 11 years. And I work with my colleagues, the provost, the athletic director, our vice president for finance and administration. And in this role, I oversee, again, a comprehensive division of student affairs that includes your typical units in student affairs in a lot of ways, like Greek life and disability services for students and conduct and other areas. I also have all the university's auxiliaries. So I have housing, I have dining, I have health services, and those units that are fee and rate based in terms of our budget. So I do oversee, I'm kind of the CFO. I'm the head of human resources, I'm the captain of the ship, and the conductor of the orchestra, all at one in terms of serving as a vice president for student affairs. And I've had the great pleasure in this role to be serving and leading our university since my first meeting on January 27th related to COVID-19, when I was told by our president to lead a team to get our students out of China. It then moved from there to get the students out of Italy, to, hey, it's coming here. And so I've had the great pleasure in this role of facilitating our senior leadership meetings for the last several weeks. I also recently was appointed to the Rhode Island Governor's Task Force to help reopen Rhode Island higher education institutions that range from Community College of Rhode Island to Brown University, a great Ivy school up the road, to all different types of institutions. And I'm charged with leading our university's reopening strategy in relationship to operations this summer and bringing people back to campus from remote. Keeping in mind, the majority of my staff, the frontline employees in health services, our housekeepers, our custodial, our maintenance employees, they've never left campus. We are open, we are serving. So the vice president is really a wearer of many hats and does a lot of different things.
Absolutely. And Lamar, I know you're serving in the role too. Anything to add that you're doing during this time?
Well, Kathy really hit it on the head with many of the responsibilities that a chief student affairs officer would have, particularly in a moment like this. So at Kent State, we are about 28,000 students strong there. We are an 8-campus system, so we have our Kent campus, but there are 7 other regional campuses as well. I have the great pleasure and fortune of um, serving as the Chief Student Affairs Officer for the university, reporting to the president, sitting on the president's cabinet, and working with many of the colleagues that Kathy noted in her introduction. Um, in a moment like this, when we're dealing with a pandemic, I too have been on in the conversations very centrally since about early January. My president and I and our cabinet have really walked through the stages, if you will, of the pandemic leading up to now, talking about what does the fall look like for our institution. We just announced on yesterday the formation of several committees that will help us reorganize and refocus our efforts on how to reopen Kent State University in the fall safely with the health and safety and well-being of our entire community in mind. I'll co-chair the academic and student affairs subcommittee of that group. And so life is very interesting as a chief student affairs officer. I also resonated very well with the balance of typical student affairs units like Greek life, student activities, student accessibility services, et cetera, balancing that with auxiliary needs. I too have our auxiliaries, so housing, dining, university health services, our rec center, et cetera. And so it is the wearer of many hats. I am very grateful and blessed to have had a career that has allowed me to sit functionally in a number of the areas previous to becoming the VP. And so I do feel relatively well prepared from an experience standpoint, albeit I don't know that you're fully prepared to take on the unknown of what a pandemic across the world might bring you. And so you do find yourself, kind of living by the seat of your pants day to day, if you will, even with the fullest preparation in your toolkit and in your backpack. So it's been a journey. It's been a good journey. I was sharing with Kathy and Antonio before that I try to find the silver lining. And I think the one thing that I would want to stress, and I hope that we get to have a further discussion about it later in our conversation, but the need to balance not only what's happening at the university, but what's happening in your own personal life. How are you personally well? How are you personally taking care of yourself so that you can be effective for the people that you're serving? So I'm glad to be with everybody this afternoon.
And I think that's a really important point to talk about how we are doing and taking care of ourselves during this time. But higher education collectively finds itself in a disruptive environment, much like many of the other sectors. And we're calling this a pandemic, but this isn't the first time that we've seen some surmounting challenges like what we're seeing right now. For context, can you talk about some of the challenges? We'll start with Lamar and then we'll go to Kathy, about some of the challenges higher education was facing before we were even talking about COVID-19.
Absolutely. I think the challenges were already there, and many of the challenges have been exacerbated by the pandemic. So for instance, already anticipating enrollment declines across the board, some heavier in some regions than others. But overall, institutions of higher education were already bracing themselves and making preparations for smaller number of students coming through our doors, because the number of high school graduates will continue to shrink as we move into the next few years. And so we'll see smaller populations of students perhaps coming to colleges and universities. I think the pandemic now has exacerbated that, in that we don't really know what the fall especially will look like. And I think this has been a moment for people to pause and really question, is this something that they really want to endeavor in with all of the uncertainty around us? Do I really want to leave home to go off to college? Would I be better suited maybe going to my local community college as opposed to a college across the country, as an example? So that enrollment piece really has been exacerbated. I think the financial implications of higher education, broadly speaking, were already existent. We're at a public institution, so I'm speaking from that context. Smaller state revenues, smaller or shrinking fiscal resources flowing into our universities. And now with the pandemic, we absolutely are faced with making some very critical decisions relative to our university's finances that I think, again, really have been always there and always imminent, but the Band-Aid, if you will, has been ripped off with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Absolutely. And Kathy, any to add to those challenges?
I think I would certainly just reemphasize the enrollment. And we know institutions around the country, depending on where you're located, mission-driven, private, public, enrollment scenarios have been different for different years. You know, here located in New England, there's certainly been struggles as there's been a decreasing high school population. We know many of our colleagues located throughout the Southwest, it's a different situation in regards to actually some schools with some strong growing enrollments. So it's really looking at the enrollment scenarios and what that could be like. We don't know yet and have really no way to forecast what the fall will be like for us in terms of enrollment deadlines. It's very telling that we're doing this very session today on May 1st. May 1st is a guidepost. It's the North Star for so many institutions in regards to enrollment. Deposits are due today. What will your first year class look like? Who's going to decide to stay closer to home? Who may decide to take a semester off? If I was a fall athlete, I may be wondering about fall sports and years of eligibility and how long, you know, I might want to be in school. At the same time, I might not be able to travel and take a year off, and I might not have a job because the job market. So just the amount of unknown. I also think I'm so glad to hear Lamar talk about financial, because we know as another public institution here at URI, we anticipate, you know, what will our state subsidy be like? Our state has put financial resources into testing, into hospital support, into other areas. So what will that state subsidy be like? Typically, we get our budgets annually in June. We do not anticipate maybe seeing our state budget this year till July or August. So how do you plan for that environment? Keeping in mind that state subsidies have been decreasing for many, many years, particularly at public institutions, which has had a direct impact on increasing tuition. And I already know we're hearing from individuals that we had to move so fast this semester to go online. And many of our institutions are truly not doing online education. We're doing more remote because online had has a pedagogy about it. We just quickly pivoted. For us, it was the Friday of spring break and just quickly decided to make this decision. Well, it's not the experience students wanted. They're not seeing each other on the quad. It's not the student activities and the programs and that whole student experience. So I think for many of our institutions, we didn't meet their expectations. None of us could have planned for a pandemic. I also think in terms of the changing landscape of higher education, I'd be remiss if I didn't say we need to also grab this opportunity.
Yes.
We need to think about what do we want. There are some things right now I think I want to keep that we're doing. In addition to that, I also think this is the time to transform. If there are things you're currently doing in your units, in your division, in your unit, you know, you wanted to stop doing, now, hey, it's COVID, we're stopping. You know, we're going to go a different direction. That could be financial, it could be resource driven by human resource, but now's the time to transform. How are we looking at institutions? What majors are we offering? You know, Kent State, College of Public Health. That, you know, for us, it's around public policy, our School of Pharmacy, our nursing. So how are we using this opportunity to capitalize and transform of where do we want our institutions to be on the other side of this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and I love, and you know, that phrase, no crisis wasted. It is an opportunity to grab hold and do some things that that we've wanted to do. I know those are some of the conversations we're having on our team. We've been talking about pivoting to some online resources, particularly around, and I want to throw this question in, around accessibility and helping those who don't have the same mobility, may have some learning impairments. How do we think about that population as well as thinking about others? Are there conversations you all are having around how we're doing remote or online learning? And I love that we're differentiating the two between it, because there are folks who spend a lot of time in that space, who've done study, research, and all of that. But particularly around the accessibility piece, what are some of the conversations that we're having and that as those who are watching might need to think about? Either one of you, I'll start there.
Yeah, I think, having the opportunity to supervise certainly our disability services for students, the great work our team is doing at URI to support our students in regards to, moving online and moving remote. It's not as easy as all of a sudden a faculty member is going to videotape a lecture. It better be captioned. It better be, how are we really embracing the true needs of many of our students? And, even working the other day, one of our great student senators on Student Senate, who is, certainly struggles in terms of vision and everything. Well, this isn't always the best environment to be in. So I think we have to be creative. I think we have to be intentional. I think we have to continue to work to stretch ourselves, making sure that our resources are going into making material accessible for all members of our community. Let's be sure, we're also talking about our faculty and staff. We need to make sure in terms of accessibility, in terms of our faculty and staff, our RAs are doing a great job on Instagram and building community and all of that, but that may not be for everybody. I also think in terms of some of this, we need to also talk about the students who are not safe at home for personal, for family reasons. And, talking most recently with one of our students, the only place they had room to study and do their schoolwork was in the bathroom. They share a one-room apartment with their mom. I got to get them back on campus. I got to figure a way. I got to think about food insecurity. I've got to think about utilities. I've got to think about, housing insecurity. We've got to think about all these things and all the accommodations so many of our students need for our LGBTQ community, for all of the reasons people not be safe at home or can't be academically successful. We've got to have our teams hyper focused on wrestling with those very topics so that students can be successful with everything they bring to our campuses. So I don't know, Lamar, what you think.
That is perfectly stated, Kathy. Really, we've talked a lot about at length COVID in the context of finances, COVID in the context of academic learning and delivery, COVID in the context of facilities and operations. But what we rarely talk about is COVID in the context of equity. And I think that's what we're discussing here this afternoon. I'm going to start with your accessibility question, Antonio, because I think that is an illumination of equity that people don't often situate with the context or conversation around equity. When you do have students who are already coming into a physical brick and mortar situation, knowing that they need some type of learning accommodation, and then that learning accommodation becomes exacerbated by the fact that we've made a very nimble pivot to remote instruction, that then comes with another set of accommodation needs. Our institution has an academic continuity committee that our director for student accessibility services, which is actually a report through student affairs, is a member of. And really, I want to give a shout out to our SAS team, because they do keep us honest about ensuring that accommodations are equitably distributed, even in a moment like this. So one of the great things that I love about Kent State is wanting to do right by the students. We're a students first institution. And so we've had a series of Facebook Lives with different cabinet members or dean members, members of our academic leadership group, talking about various facets of the university experience. And I remember after the first two, I got an email from our student accessibility services director and say, why aren't we captioning the Facebook Lives? And it's like, yes, absolutely. Like, let's make sure that the captions are there for people to access the information that we're trying to share and be forthright with. Those small things add up. And then to Kathy's point about addressing situations or environments that students are returning to or have the potential to return to. We have about 53 students remaining on campus, largely those students who would not be academically successful had they returned to their homes, or they don't have homes to return to at all. And so we can't just assume that we can blanket an approach without, this is where the equality versus equity conversation really comes to bear. We can't do all things equal. It doesn't work in a moment like this. We really must stand on our true value of equity, and figure out what is going to be the best strategy, what is going to be the best approach for not only students, but faculty and staff who are all impacted by this really, really large seismic shift in the way we are offering the university experience in totality. I'm so glad you brought that up, Kathy, about the environments which students are returning to. That's so important.
I know the CARES Act has provided some institutions with some funding, and I know for those administrators who are watching who are not as familiar as I'm sure you all have been weighed into it. Can you talk a little bit about what institutions might be able to do with CARES funds to support either overall operations or students directly?
Yeah, so our CARES Act funding is kind of split half and half. So one half goes to support the institution directly in terms of its operational needs, and there's a wide variety and nuance to how that money is levied and distributed. The other half of that money has to go into the hands of students via emergency grants. So students that are finding themselves in true emergencies because they've been displaced, because they've lost their job, they don't have the financial resources to support their housing, food, etc. That money needs to filter through the institution to get right in the hands of the students. It cannot go to reimburse the university for costs that we incurred for having to refund room, board, parking, etc. It has to go directly into the hands of students. And I'm very appreciative that that funding exists, and I still think that the funding presents an equity issue. I can't fund DACA students. I can't fund international students. And so I have to find other ways to really address the needs of these small but mighty populations, pockets of populations around the campus, in order to have an equitable way in which we leverage our emergency grant funds. So we have CARES Act funding, but we also have philanthropic fundraising that we're trying to leverage to meet the needs of all students. So even with federal funding, we still return to the equity conversation around how it can be levied and distributed.
Yeah, I know as we were talking through it and the limitations that were placed on it, you see the impact of our administration on some of these decisions, right? And you would see that with any administration, see the impact of their philosophies and beliefs in it. And definitely for all of us who are concerned about DACA students, we've got an emergency fund. I'm sure you all have a fund. And for those of you who are watching, like and share this, and you can go to the institutional websites of both their institutions if you're looking for a place to contribute. I am sure all of these institutions have students who we are needing to support in some avenue with those. We were talking a little bit about pre-college students who are trying to make a decision, and I know that's a big part of those who are tuning in today. And so we want to give a shout out to all of you who, your parents or students who are trying to figure out right now, what is it that you do about the fall? And so maybe you all can start, and we'll start with Lamar, talking about what should these parents and students be looking towards. How do we set some realistic expectations about decision-making that institutions are trying to navigate right now?
Yeah. think the first thing that I would candidly and transparently say is we don't have all of the answers that you're going to be asking. And I don't mean that to be crass. I don't mean that to be deflecting or not helpful. I know as a parent myself, albeit my children are much smaller than going to college age children, and I hope that they stay that way for a very long time. I know the questions that I might ask as a parent, and I just want to say we are working as tirelessly and as diligently as we possibly can to get some of these same questions that you have answered. We also have those same questions. And so the first thing I would ask would be to extend some grace, that we're not going to have all of the answers in this moment. I think parents should really become aware of where the institutions that they are most interested in are in terms of not the geographic location, but where are they in the process of navigating how COVID, how this pandemic has impacted their institutions operations. Many institutions are waiving fees for applications. Many institutions are pushing deadlines back for scholarships. Many institutions are doing things differently with their housing applications. You should also understand how the health and wellness and safety of the campus is being discussed, and what tools are in place or emerging to ensure the safety of our institutions and the health and well-being of the campus community at large. But it is a very uncertain time, and we recognize that. We give credence to that. It's uncertain for all of us. And so I hope that we can work with parents and family members as partners as they're trying to make decisions, get questions asked, and to really understand fully what will be the best trajectory for their student as they move forward through the summer and certainly into the fall.
Yeah, and I certainly would add to that. Everything he said is so important to think about. It's a difficult time. It's a difficult time for our high school seniors, just like it's a difficult time for our college seniors.
Mm-hmm.
This was not how their senior year, was supposed to go, and it's certainly not how anyone. So many people right now that are watching, you're homeschooling, you're trying to navigate your own job, we're all kind of dealing with so many of these things, and our staff and faculty are as well too. One of my great staff members, 3 young children at home, trying to teach all afternoon, trying to balance and answer questions. And it is hard. There is nothing about this is easy. And none of us have been here before. But higher education survived the flu in 1918, the Great Depression, World War I, World War II, the recession in 2008. Did higher education look the same after each of those? Certainly it did not. We know there are many colleges around the country right now that they were struggling before COVID-19. This just kind of exacerbated that financial situation that some institutions found themselves in. So there's estimates that as many as 20% of colleges and universities are not going to make it through this. How do you figure out which ones are going to make it? It's really looking at what information is on the website. It's looking at information that they're communicating. You want to send your sons and daughters and every one of your family members to support them in an institution that supported their students through this. So what messages are they putting out there? That voice of care? What level of health services is available on that campus? Some colleges have their own hospitals. Some colleges don't. Some colleges are located across the street from a hospital. What level of care is going to be there? The thread that makes me so sad that is woven through all of this is all of us need to change our expectations. We have to change our expectations of what that college experience is like. And that is heartbreaking. That's not what any of us wanted our children to experience. It's not why I went into this field. It's not, when I think about having to be 6 feet away from students and group sizes, and it's not why I went into this, so many years ago. But even having a conversation yesterday with our dean of students to say, hey, what are you going to do with your waiting room? Because where we're getting information from, know that there's 2 areas. One is internal and one is external. Mm-hmm. So as we look externally, we are following information, every institution, based on the CDC guidelines and their own state, really, Department of Health. So they're the two areas we're getting a lot of information from. All of us are hoping for vaccines. All of us are participating. Many of our institutions are actually involved in the very research to take on this horrible health crisis we have found ourselves in. That's what universities, that's what we do. In addition to that, there's internal decisions that need to be made, and we will never make them fast enough for you. We can't. We don't have the information. My record so far is one day I started 32 emails and I never got to send them because by the end of the day, something had changed. So 32 is my record so far. I hope I don't break it. So we actually want to delay making decisions, because if I were to make a decision today about the fall, it's not with all of the information I'm going to have in June. And that can be very frustrating because people want to know and people want to make decisions. But I also know you trust us to make decisions with the best information we can. We're not going to have that just yet. But we all need to lower our expectations that the campuses are going to feel different. They're going to be different, whether that's smaller because we've shrunk our density, or maybe that's because everyone's wearing face coverings. And that's not something we ever envisioned doing. But I'm sure your campus bookstores are soon all going to be selling, if not already, branded, cloth face masks, because we just ordered ours for our store this week. But we're also going to have to think about maybe how the residence halls look.
Yeah.
They're all going to have to be singles. So no, you can't then live with your best friend from home or from camp that you wanted to be a roommate with. These are the things that we're all wrestling with. Universities have formed planning teams and scenario planning teams to look at health and safety, our academic mission, the community and sense of belonging that we build, our enrollment and budgets, and our communications. Most universities are going to have those areas covered by some of the teams right now. Cross-functional teams working together to make these decisions. We're going to get information out as quickly as we have, and trust me, no one's holding back. We're not keeping these great secrets like we've made this decision. We're just not letting anybody know. We're making decisions the best we can. And also trust us that we're all making it in different states and with different resources on our own campus. So what University A decides in state Z is going to be very different than what college B decides in state Y. So we're all not going to be making the same decisions. So it's going to be factoring and figuring some of those things out. So it's a great question, and one that's going to change minute by minute.
I'm so glad you hit that last part, because we're fielding so many calls of saying, why aren't you doing what X is doing? And I told my team, I'm going to become a broken record these next couple of weeks. We are making decisions for the University of Houston in the context of Texas, in this city, given our geolocation and political influences and the university resources, right? And I think that's a good space. As much as it is of having answers, sometimes it's about asking the right questions. And I want to move some of our conversation. We talked a little bit about housing, and I know all of you've got familiarity with that. I always get that word tied up. But I want to talk about the rest of student services, particularly those who are doing some either academic or social support or inclusivity work, who are trying to figure out too, what does our work look like, right? In a time when we're talking about furloughs, we're talking about layoffs, we're talking about cutting staff and positions. And then we've also got some faculty I know who are on and are trying to figure out, right, how do we differentiate between online and remote? And how do we make sure that we're improving distant education, right? Or away, or whatever the word is that we're going to land on, because I think we do need to land on an approach to this. Let's start there, and let's talk a little bit about the other parts of student services, and then we'll talk about what can we do with some faculty work too. What are the questions they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think in terms of student services, it's going to be interesting and different. And this is where I think the opportunity can be to transform and what services. So I give a huge shout out to our director of our Gender and Sexuality Center. is doing an absolutely amazing job. And they have basically, transitioned to this amazing online. Lavender graduation will be online, like all these things. But in doing that, they realized, hey, we can do programming through the summer in the same way to keep people connected and keep a sense of community. Where in the past, maybe we didn't do as much of that because the students weren't on campus. So I also think that's a great example in terms of how are we grabbing some of these different opportunities. We also, had a conversation yesterday with our director of our Multicultural Student Services Center. We got to be having and leading conversations about the racial differences in terms of how this is impacting different communities. We've got to be bringing people together to talk about the Latino community, talk about the Black community, the differences in terms of socioeconomic and health impacts. And we've got to be, the universities are the exact place where those conversations should be happening. That is our job. And if we're not doing that, shame on us. And we have the resources and the people in our colleges, our faculty and staff, our students to come together and talk about the racial inequities of this virus, the death rates in the senior homes. We have staff who are studying geriatrics, and we have to have those spaces and conversations. So I think the programming has to take on multiple fronts in regards to the educational opportunity. We're training the leaders of the future that hopefully we don't experience something like this again. And how are we bringing up, I did a town hall with our student leaders and student senate the other night, and some of them were like, if we're online in the fall, I'm not coming to school. And I was like, well, our president really challenged them because we were like, well, there's not gonna be a lot of jobs out there maybe. And wouldn't you just as soon continue to learn, because we actually need you. We need you to get your degrees, and we need you to get out there and fix this that the people before us have created. I also think we need to be creating, I don't know how many people are having a whole lot of fun right now. Fun and laughter and community and opportunities, we have to get to, and Lamar said, later in this conversation about self-care. I give huge credit to our campus recreation team that's doing, videos of workouts you can do in your kitchen and some of those types of things. We were trying to do Facebook Live, actually classes with Campus Rec, but they shut us down because we didn't have the rights to the music. So that's going to happen. So you adjust, you pivot. But we have to be doing those types of things, I think, across, look at the changes we've all had to make in orientation.
Yeah.
Orientation for some schools was already all online. We're going to be all online this year. Conduct takes on a whole new meaning in this environment. And someone said to me the other day, well, what if we just do housing and we just bring in first-year students? That'll decrease conduct, right? No. No, it's going to increase conduct. Let's have that conversation. So those are the pieces we have to be in it. That's where Lamar and I are, at the senior leadership tables and having those conversations, help guiding our colleagues through that. But we've got to be looking across our institution in regards to how we're going to continue to work with that. So Lamar, I'd be curious, what do you think and how are you seeing that it can play out?
Yeah, many of the same ways. So, we've offered a lot of programs and services that were once face-to-face online. So our lab grad was online. Our Karamu, which is our pre-graduation celebration for students of color, will be offered online. We're doing a lot of summer programming. A lot of the programs that were summer programs in person, our Academic Stars program, as an example, through our Multicultural Center, which is one of our biggest and most signature programs, is now going to be moved into the fall into a different kind of way. So out of the summer altogether. And so we do, I hearken back to Kathy's earlier point about this is the moment of transformation and innovation in student affairs. And I really think that this is where the rubber meets the road for us. In order to, I think I might position the conversation a little differently, that in order to survive, we will have to be innovative. We will have to be transformational, or we won't be around for long. I think in terms of academic support services, they too are finding creative ways to deliver remote instruction or the services maybe in a different way. I know we have our tutoring through our university college. As an example, academic tutoring is now being offered virtually with our student tutors, our peer-to-peer tutors, which is amazing. And so we do have to lower or differentiate our expectations between pre-COVID and post-COVID, because we will look different. We have to look different. This moment requires us to transform and to be innovative. I think this is the cocoon stage of the caterpillar, if I'm honest about it. And hopefully we emerge as the beautiful butterflies that we will desire to be as institutions of higher education. And really think about how we meet the needs of a diverse student body in a very different way than we have been accustomed to. And for me, while daunting, while challenging, while sometimes tiring most days, it's invigorating. It's exciting to see what we might become if we do our best work around the innovative transformations that need to occur in this moment.
I see several.
I'll just add one quick thing, AP. On a conversation the other night with some colleagues across New England, you know, a lot of people are also saying, like, how do I actually pivot some of my student affairs staff to be academic advisors, so if housing is shrunk by half, can I take some of the hall directors, can we repurpose them in terms of academic advising? So I think how we are going to be able to do that is going to exactly get to what Lamar is saying, is things are going to be different. And some of our jobs are going to be changing. Some roles are going to be changing. And I think at some institutions, you said earlier, you know, institutions are already announcing layoffs and furloughs. So at some places it might be, are you okay transitioning to an academic advisor and you have employment? And we'll train you, how do we do that in an online environment or an on-campus environment, or we're going to have to make tough decisions about employment. So I think those things too, how much can we pivot right now to assist the institution in sustaining its mission and being very mission driven in terms of the in-classroom and co-curricular experience?
Absolutely. I'm going to go back because we've got several conduct folks who are on, and they're commenting and sharing how academic misconduct is up. And
Absolutely.
Both students and faculty are struggling with academic honesty in this space and moving forward. I think that's a space that we're going to have to continue to explore, right? We had this conversation before higher ed, before COVID, that online education was the wave of the future. We saw some bustling institutions. I think I want to say Southern Mass. That's a big online institution. I don't want to call it wrong, but I know it's in Massachusetts.
Southern New Hampshire University.
Southern New Hampshire. Well, not in Mass. Yeah. So what do we make now of this? Do we really believe that students want online education, or is it that what we're offering isn't really online education and we haven't had the opportunity to do that well just yet?
I don't know that students, I think this goes back to managing expectations. I don't know that students conceptualize their college or university experience to be online. I think it raises a lot of questions about the value that they place on their collegiate experience, the financial investment that families or others or themselves as students are making into their educational experience and what they get out of that experience. And I also, coupled with that, don't really believe that institutions have really done their most favorable or best work in providing a comprehensive online education that would entice students to want to have that type of experience en masse. Some students very much want to have an online education because that's what suits their individual needs, that's what suits the dynamics of their family, their home life, etc. And then we have the other cadre of students that want the on-campus face-to-face, live in the residence hall, go to the event kind of experience. And we, in that space, I don't think have done our best work to shape what that might look like in this online world. So I think it's a balancing of both. It's a balancing of really understanding helping students to understand what that would look like, and us putting our best foot forward to demonstrate what that might look like.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are watching, I encourage you to like and share this video. We're nearing the portion of the conversation where we're going to be taking questions from the audience. We've got a couple more prepared questions, but I want to encourage you, if you're watching on the Deep End page, and not through a watch party if you're on another page, but if you're on the Deep End page, type your comments and your questions into the comment section, and we'll get to those in a minute. Lamar, I want to go back to a comment you made. You said if we aren't innovative, we're not going to make it, and I don't want to lose sight of that, because several of, whether you're administrator, frontline, whatever, we're struggling with being productive and managing self and home now. And so how do we, what's the real words we need to hear, right? Because it's still an opportunity. I am for hope, and y'all, I do all hope and change, and I'm with it. But I think there is a space that is a truth, an underlying truth, that it can be a silver lining that people need to hear right now. I know my own personal well-being, right? There's moments when I'm good, and then there's moments when I'm not. And then there's also moments when I'm saying to myself, you need to be on it. Your team needs you right now. You got to push through what you're dealing with. So how do we be innovative, manage mental and personal right now to move us and our teams forward? How do we do that well?
Well,
or somewhat.
The truth of the matter for me is it goes back to a philosophy that I've held quite a long time, even well before this pandemic. I have never been one to believe in balance. I think that is a conception that sounds nice on paper and in theoretical framings and in conversations and discourse that really in practice doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Balance would indicate or suggest that I have to have equal amounts of one or both of said things. So in this case, it might be work and life. And that's just not reality. And then in this moment, it shows how unrealistic balance really is. What I'm more of a fan of is integration. And integration allows for those worlds to collide in the ways that make sense for the individual. Integration allows for there to be more flexibility, to have a little more of one and a little less of other. And you as the individual really can make that decision for yourself. I'm home right now, just moved into a new home yesterday with a spouse and a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old and a dog. And we have spent the last 5 to 6 weeks, like many others around our country, together in the house, still managing life, and still trying to make sense of how we integrate all of these worlds together. And some days we feel very good about how we've done that, and some days we don't feel that good about how we've done that. And we're able to be honest with one another about that. So I think there has to be a moment of really reconceptualizing this self-care in the context of a more integrative strategy as opposed to a balancing act. I think when we get into the balancing act is where we begin to find issues of trying to make it all work or trying to make it all fit, which then can exacerbate a diminished sense of mental health or well-being, and then ultimately lead to not caring for ourselves at all, because we just don't know how, and it's tiring to try to figure out how. So for me, the truth of the matter is balance has to go out of the window, and you have to find a way to instead integrate these pieces of your life. And then I'll stop with the advice that I give my staff and students a lot, and that is you're no good for anybody else until you're good for yourself first. So the priority has to be you in order to be able to serve the people and to engage the people that mean the most to you, be that in your professional setting or in your personal setting, to the fullness. You have to be full. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, I always tell staff, put your own oxygen mask on first, right? I mean, and there's a privilege that comes in knowing that saying, because it means you have the opportunity to fly. But yeah, everything you said, I don't believe in balance. I don't think it exists. The work-life balance is no. I don't think that, and maybe that's certainly the path I've taken and how I've led in terms of the work that I do. But I do know we need to, and sometimes I'm a better role model than others, right? To take breaks. I take my dog for a walk every day, and I never used to do that. I'm wearing jeans right now. Like, this is awesome. So I'm finding those moments where, and not in a suit every day. So I think those moments I take pride in. I'm also willing to be vulnerable. You know, my staff recently, I did a division-wide meeting. We had 137 people on a WebEx. And I shared a story with them that I'll share here now, that, you know, a couple nights ago, all I wanted for dinner was a baked potato. Just wanted a baked potato. We had sour cream in the house. We had cheddar cheese in the house. We had potatoes and we had butter. Like, what else are you going to have? Like, it screamed to me baked potato. Well, I went to the pantry to pull up the bag of potatoes and they were rotten. So yeah, I lost it. So I fell apart in the kitchen. You and I know it had nothing to do with the baked potato. I mean, I really wanted a baked potato, but I also recognized I couldn't just go to the store and get one. I also recognize it was even today, couldn't find the real shirt I wanted to wear. So that was a thing this morning. It's also okay to be vulnerable and recognize that, like, today's a hard day. And of course, today's the day that it's the WebEx, right? Today's just one of those days. I'm having a hard day. I'm having an off day. I'm tired. I'm trying to balance my staff needs. I'm trying to be, take care of everything, but I lose sight of me in that sometimes. And you have to recognize what that is and what that means. One of the great things I did the other day was NASPA, which is a Student Affairs Association, allowed us to sign up for coaching. And a lot of the retired VPs and all, and I had a great person I was assigned to who was like, you need to get some things off your plate. So actually what I did, and I'm trying to role model this next week, I have handed over the operation of our division next week to my associate vice president. She's in charge. She's got the staff meetings. She's running the meeting because I need next week to focus on our future. And I'm not getting that when I'm day to day in the weeds, still responding to COVID. So I trust her. I know she's going to do a great job. I have an amazing team. I know some of them are even on now. They're absolutely outstanding. They're doing their best. But I know we've got to have grace. We've got to have patience. We've got to lower our expectations. And that's the three areas in terms of doing this. So for me, I get up every morning, I work out. I'm trying to eat. I think I'm actually eating better right now, but I know there's a privilege in saying that, in terms of just trying to, I'm not running down to the student union and getting tater tots as often right now. So that's disappeared. So I think it is about self-care, but there's not such a thing as balance, and recognize this is hard. And none of us have done this before. And also recognize, I love Schitt's Creek, one of my favorite shows probably ever, came to it late, but I was way too upset when that show ended. Like, it was a good ending, but also just recognizing those triggers we're having on our life right now that are going to be upsetting. I mean, even, Netflix, I think, has a comfy at home or, kind of track now that you can look at those old favorite movies and stuff. So practice self-care as best you can.
Yeah, it was on mute there for a second. I was just like, yes, all of that, everything that all of you were saying, because I think folks are trying to figure out self-care. And I think I've pivoted away from the word self-care because I feel like it's so cliche now. And I like to talk about, my holistic wellness. Just that reframing works for me. It means the same thing, but just thinking about some of those. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and I see there's a couple more that are down in the comments. We were talking about our most vulnerable students online. What are some of the ways that you all have worked to try to assist them in the online space? Because one of the things that we saw, we were talking in a division meeting, and there are a large number of students who have not logged into any of these online spaces. What can we do as student services professionals to assist these students in that space?
I think a couple of different things. One is we have a remote learning task force that's led out of our provost office, is really recognizing and encouraging our collaboration. And I think a lot of this is coming down to collaboration. So our staff and student affairs, as they're dialoguing with students or reaching out to students that we know, is how are classes going, how are things not going, and they're giving feedback to us. They're talking about Professor A or Professor B and telling us exactly how it's going. We're feeding that information regularly to the remote learning and task force. I had a conversation the other day with one of the faculty members, and I was asking about class attendance online, and they're like, the same students are coming online that were coming in person. If they weren't coming in person, now they're not coming online. So I think it's also recognizing the vulnerability for many of our students was always there. And this is a bigger issue we need to address and to talk about in terms of that. It's dialogue, it's communication, it's working with your early alert offices, it's working across your staff. Some smaller campuses have done an absolutely amazing job of every faculty and staff taking 10 students and you call on them to see how they're doing. Larger institutions, I think of some of the schools that are 20,000, 30,000 up, that's going to be hard to do, but it might be worth it if you can identify some of your more vulnerable population. I also know our case managers have been working overtime and providing support in terms of the work that they're doing. Online does give us some different diagnostic tools. So are we taking that information and saying who is logging in or who's not logging in, and then who's getting that information? If the faculty is just sitting on it, how do we get that information to the right staff that can provide that assistance? So I think in the future, we're going to have different ways of doing this. Right now, we're kind of creating some as we go along to help those students, but we do need to be reaching out. I do believe our institution, and many have made this change in the grading policy. I think that's going to be a really important thing for our students, because for some students, this semester it was too much. And now we're in finals and you have to recognize that. So, what grading policy, how are you encouraging students also to look at the new grading policy? Because for our institution, it was a kind of a opt-in. And how are you having those conversations? They could choose a letter grade or a pass fail. We created both opportunities. So how are you having those conversations as well too? But whether you look at your Pell recipients, whether you look at Pell and just a little bit above Pell, whether you're looking at what are those vulnerable populations, and we've got to be reaching out. We've got to be communicating. We've got to be consistent and transparent in offering help and support.
I'm doing this on mute thing, right? So we're going to transition a little bit to some of the questions that were coming in. And one of the questions was around FERPA and how do we handle FERPA when parents are listening in?
I think that's an interesting one that I think we're learning day by day. I'd add HIPAA to the mix as well, particularly in a health pandemic. In terms of how we keep the privacy of our students and their information still at top of mind, even in a remote environment, and in the ways we're disseminating information and the ways in which we're assisting or attempting to assist students to navigate this in a variety of different ways, that those two things are still the lay of the law. And so we have to adhere to them. And sometimes it's it can be even more challenging than it already is to not divulge or to not share some information that a parent or family member might be requesting, because we know that it probably is for very good reason for something that's happening in their home, and yet we're still governed by these laws. And to my knowledge today, those laws have not been relaxed to allow us to divulge that information. And so I think we're learning day by day. I think on our the more technical side, working a lot with our IT divisions to ensure the safety and security of our information, given that everybody is on their computer these days. So there's probably higher prevalence of breach of information in a variety of ways that we want to try to mitigate as students are still navigating their educational pursuits in a remote fashion. And we're really just trying to balance it. I mean, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. This is such a complex and nuanced issue that we've never seen before in this way. And so we're learning every day, just like everybody else.
I would add, there are reaffirming, if you're familiar, you work in higher education, we've got a FERPA form. Every institution has one. I am in some ways reaffirming and asking the question, are you in a space by yourself? Is someone else with you? Are you okay with me sharing this information? Do we need to have this conversation at a different time, and trying to be flexible about it? If you can change the conversation. That's not always possible, especially in student conduct situations or health. And then if you're in the conversation and you or the student is still not feeling well, try to talk as broadly as possible at times without necessarily naming pieces that the student may already be familiar with. So, i.e. referencing, remember we had a conversation on X date about something. Those are ways, and it's not all perfect, but those are some, I think, some tangible ways that might help you execute trying to retain privacy and needing to have a critical conversation too. We had a question on innovation. What are your thoughts on being innovative in the context of shared governance when it's that feeling of being restrictive and things are moving a little slow?
That's a great question. I think I'd want some more clarity in regards to what's moving slow. Is it decision making? Is it those types of things? I think our institution, for one, has done a pretty good job. I think within a week of us going on into a remote learning environment, we had our first faculty senate meeting, and it was something to see how they were voting, how they were using. We use WebEx at our university, so I think that we've done that fairly well. Senior leadership used to meet weekly. Our senior leadership team then went to daily, and now we're twice a week. I meet with my direct reports twice a week. We were daily. Now we're down to twice a week because I need to free them up to go do stuff. So I think I'd want to know what's happening at that specific institution, kind of what's delayed in regards to those decisions, what kind of decisions do they want to know. I also would push back a little bit, and this is something I said a little bit earlier, is there's so much unknown right now. The decision I would have made 3 or 4 weeks ago is very different than the decision I'm going to make today. Whether that's about summer, whether that's looking into the fall. So that's the thing too, is we also don't want to make decisions too soon. And then we're kind of out there and wow, I wish we wouldn't have done that. So I think, use your institutions. Have they created some basic guiding principles around their scenario planning? Getting your staff and getting in the mindset of we're running scenarios all the time. There are financial capacity scenarios for housing and dining. There are scenarios in regards to how do we develop program size. Like the state of Rhode Island, particularly for the fall, is telling us probably groups no longer than 50. Okay, well, now we know that. Well, what does that look like for the start of the semester, and how do we plan around that? But I know that could change. We know some states have already started to open up. So then if we start to see an increase in any of those states of the virus, is that going to impact some of us who 50% of our students are out of state? Who's coming and where are they coming from? These are the things we just don't know yet. So I think there are opportunities for dialogue. Find out who's on your university's planning teams. Do you know them? Is there a way to connect with them? Is there things particularly you want to share? But the innovation piece, I think, is huge. Now's the time. We can transform right now. Were you thinking about centralized services in some areas? Or were you thinking about how do I change this area? Or were you thinking about, this person should be reporting to this person? Now's the time to do that and start really recreating some of those different things. So I'd be curious, Lamar, what do you think?
Ditto to everything you said. It almost sounds like we work at the same institution if I was not knowledgeable that we in fact did not. We were able to very nimbly move in concert and in collaboration with our faculty and the faculty governance structure to this new way of offering a Kent State University experience. Shout out to our amazing faculty senate for really being partners and good champions, along with our president and our senior leadership. And then, I went to Faculty Senate online for the first time, and it was an amazing experience. I had the pleasure of presenting to the Faculty Senate during that same meeting. So it was great to just see everybody, albeit virtually, all in, still wanting to make sure that they were showing up in the ways that they needed to make sure that the institution moved forward. It did not come without questioning. And I think that's the beauty of a shared governance, because you are able to get the myriad and multitudinous questions to help make the informed decision best. But I don't feel like anything was slow. And in fact, I'm quite pleasantly surprised how quickly we moved from physical in-person to remote, classes moving, students out of the residence halls. And we did that in concert and collaboration with one another and with the support of one another. And I know that may not be everybody's story on their campus. I'm privileged and blessed to work on a campus where that was in fact the case. So I agree with Kathy's, questioning of, what is the campus culture and environment like, even outside of a moment like this? Who's serving on your institutional planning committees? Where is the representation, if you work in student affairs, on those planning committees? And how can you leverage your relationships with your own divisional colleagues to learn more about how to be more nimble or to offer suggestions and advice? What are those lines of communication like? So I think there are a lot of questions embedded in how shared governance works or doesn't, as it pertains to helping the institution kind of move through a moment like this.
I think one of the things I learned, I think I just learned along the way, and I just quickly pivoted, and I had to change my thought process to give some language to my team, was decisions have become a little bit more centralized at the top. And that happened because we need to be very careful about how we're communicating, what we're communicating, especially when we're talking about refunding millions of dollars across the institution. There are hundreds of millions into the billions of dollars that have gone back to students, and how we communicate that from multiple aspects of a division. And so I had to tell our team, where you may have made a decision alone, that is now questioned in this context until we've got to a space where we feel good. And I think now, Kathy, you talked about it, now the relaxing, right? Passing some things off, you shifting your direction to the fall and beyond, we're seeing that same thing happen too. But I know for some, embedded in some of those thoughts, like, yeah, no one told us that decisions were becoming more centralized. You read it, you understood it, you kept moving. But for those who are looking for the words, I'm offering that to you now. That's something that's happening, and it's being relaxed as we're moving forward. But again, the leadership nugget is when it shifts, read the tea leaf and move with the times, rather than getting stuck at, yeah, I could make this decision by myself. Absolutely, sure could. Right now, we just need to be a little bit more restrictive with that. I want to talk about, we talked about expectations, changing expectations and complete, but I think it's worth revisiting, because there's a lot of angst and feel among staff that we're going to be expected to do as much as we've done before with less staff, or now we're doing more. What's that conversation like you're having with your team? As we're talking about, we need to change our expectations, but folks are still in that mindset. I don't have the same level of staff that I might have had before, or I'm thinking that I may not have that. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you can't do that. And I think that's a very simplistic way of saying that. I wanted to say something else, but I won't. That expectation has to change. We can't look the same. And I think, Antonio, let me extend even what you are sharing, because what also is resident is people's value being tied up in the number of people, the number of programs, the quantity of things, as opposed to really understanding the quality side of how the experience is levied. So I'm not as interested in the fact that you are going from 10 people to 7 people, or that you're going from 14 programs to 11 programs. What I'm more interested in is how are we making this moment transformational enough with even 3 programs that might be most impactful to the student experience, given our context and given our situation, where we can still affect change, where we can still impact outcomes, where we can still help students persist, retain, and graduate from the institution. And this moment really requires us to think about that in a very different way than we ever have been. In previous years, we've been given choice as to whether or not we desire to move in that way. This pandemic has required us to think differently about that. I think performance, really the conversation around what performance yields in terms of what we evaluate, what do we measure as our benchmark for success, all of that has to reshape and think differently and be different as we move forward. We will look different. Make no mistake about it. There's no way that we can return to even a January 2020 experience in April or May or June or July. That is going to look like something that we've never seen, and will require us to think more broadly about the quality of the experience versus the quantity of people or the quantity of programs that we are assuming leadership for.
And I'll add just one thing to that. I also think people are thinking that in regards to, I'm keeping everything that I used to do and I'm picking up things from somebody else and you're going to add that on top. No, I'm going to completely change what you were doing. And that's hard for us because we actually, I always think of this way. Those of us, a lot of us, particularly in higher ed and predominantly in student affairs, we love change if we thought of it ourselves. If somebody else thought of it, then, that's hard and I want to keep doing what I was doing. But come on, people, there's programs on our campuses. They just need to stop. They've needed to stop. It's time to stop them. Tell everybody it was COVID. That's the thing. So we have to think about what we're going to stop, what we're going to keep, but also what we're going to add. And I think we just finished our division strategic plan. So on Tuesday, it's the conversation with my team to be like, oh yeah, hey, about that strategic plan, we've got to relook at it because things are going to be really different now. So I think people have got to understand, and I know it's going to be hard because there are a lot of programs out there that you created yourself and you don't want to let go of that, but it's going to be probably time. And in terms of how do we assess it? What is the effectiveness? What does this world and the kind of things look like? Also keep in mind on some of our campuses, our density is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
Whether it's enrollment's down, it's going to happen. Some places are saying as much as 20%, or it's because you had to change density in the halls. That's gonna happen. So yeah, I think all of us are going to take on some additional things, but you're also going to be letting go of stuff.
And let me just add, Antonio, quickly, and Kathy, because you make an excellent point, Kathy, about the person being tied to the program, that's their program and they don't want to let that go. And I just want to offer up a piece of wisdom that I learned from mentors throughout the years. Don't allow yourself to put your professional or personal value in a program. Your worth as a staff member or an employee of whatever unit you're working for is not wrapped up in your ability to execute this one or several programs. That is typically not why you were hired to serve in the roles that you serve in. What is of more value is your ability to be nimble, your ability to think creatively, your ability to move flexibly in between the gray areas and the ambiguity that comes with this work. So regardless of whether you are tied to these programs or you're changing and you're now focused in another area or another way, that you are still valued as a member of that team. It's not tied to I value you because you supervise 6 people, or I value you because you executed this really awesome program. I value you because of the skill set that you bring, and let's be able to transfer those skill sets into multiple different ways of executing the work.
Good stuff. And I want to continue along that vein, because I think this is a space that people are asking, always asking, how did you get to where you're at? But before we ask, how do we get to where you're at? What skills are you relying on right now to help you navigate the space that you're in? And that might be a place where we can help some folks who are looking to develop their own competencies.
I think strategic thinking has got to be at the top of the list. Strategic and innovative thinking. I think also remaining calm under pressure or in a crisis, and having an ability to be free to think clearly, and it's not to compartmentalize your emotions or your own even personal feeling on a situation, but it is to say, don't become so wrapped up in that you're not able to give clear thought to forward progress. And I know a lot sitting in this seat. My president is looking to me for, so what does the future look like for student affairs? I just had to share that with the president's cabinet this morning before our call. What does the future look like? What are the worst and best case scenarios in all facets of the 18 departments that are resident within what we call student affairs at Kent State? And so it requires you to really be able to leverage true leadership skills, and demonstrate that in a moment of crisis while trying to remain calm under pressure. So I think that strategic piece, that strategic way of thinking, and to look at an issue on all of its sides and not necessarily tie it to what it means for you, but what does it mean for the university, is key. And then that calm grace under fire, if you will, also are 2 big ones that I'm relying on day in and day out.
I would echo it's strategic thinking. It's really multidimensional thinking. So, as you kind of came up, you kind of first thought about, just the staff that I'm supervising and the consequences of my decisions. But then as you add different departments, you start thinking about the consequences of those decisions and those staffs. Now it's looking at the big picture. It's understanding, whether it's just your university focused, or certainly here in Rhode Island, it's very state focused. I was sharing with Lamar and Antonio before we started. One of the things we've done at University of Rhode Island right now to continue to keep our dining staff busy and employed, they're now serving food at the senior centers around the state. I mean, that's something we can do. We're a small state. It's pretty easy for us to mobilize. So not only are we doing research in the labs and our pharmacies making hand sanitizer, and we're printing masks where we have 3D printers, our dining team is delivering groceries and preparing food for senior centers. So it's being able to think and see and anticipate what and who needs what. I think in student affairs, we get really good at crisis response. And I want to be the one that people turn to when they need something. And I want my staff to step into that space as well, too. That's part of our mission. That's part of how we serve. That's part of the work that we do. So it's that multi-dimensional thinking. The other thing I think that I would share is hiring great people. Supervision is ongoing. Supervision is about recruiting people to come to your institution. It's about people then hiring and serving your institution. It's about finding ways, and whether you're in a campus that has heavy and very strong labor unions, or it's finding ways around collective bargaining agreements, sometimes helping people leave an institution through whatever means are possible so you can bring someone else in. So I think it's recognizing your skills as a supervisor and hiring really good people. So you don't I don't have to run housing. I'm an incredible housing director. I don't have to worry about dining. I have a great dining director. So being able to step away from those things so I can just feed them information and know that they're going to go. and get that work done. And our centers are doing incredible things. And so it's knowing those pieces. I also think you got to have some humor. You got to find a way, whether it's everybody wears slippers today, or you're wearing school pride day, or you're, whatever, it's going to make some people laugh. Or I said, finishing up Schitt's Creek, or, some of those different things. You got to find a way to laugh and help your staff find that ability too. But most importantly for me, the opportunity right now to facilitate our senior leadership team meetings twice a week. I'm able to bring a very student-focused lens to that space, to what we're talking about, to how we're communicating at a research institution with a huge research mission. I'm able to infuse student first, student focus in terms of those conversations. So I think there are some of the skills right now. I'm relying on my mentors and their advice from past, and mentors and staff that I've supervised. So this is pulling on everything that I've ever done in my career. Everything.
Great words. Great words. What are the stressors right now in your conversations? Both of you report to the campus president. And I think one of the things that have always helped me to navigate my present is thinking about what the challenges are in the conversations that are happening above me. What are your presidents sharing with you that's happening at the institutional level, the state level, federal government, education coordinating committees, whatever that be? What are they sharing with you that are their top challenges right now?
Yeah, I think my president's number one challenge comes from how we will move forward in the fiscal climate that awaits us beyond this spring semester. So we are anticipating a 20% budget reduction at Kent State. We are anticipating that the state subsidy of instruction will dwindle by 20%. We're anticipating tuition and fee revenue to be 20% less than it was last fiscal. And so how do we weather that? And what are the institutional strategies that need to be in place in order for us to successfully weather that 20% cut? So fiscal challenges for sure are at top of mind.
Same. Fiscal challenges, budget, state subsidies, impacts on the institution as we look to enrollment, and we had a great enrollment year. Our team went above and beyond. We had a great sign up for housing year, for returning students. Everything's great. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be in the middle of a pandemic. So they're the kind of things that we talk about, but a lot of it is state legislature, general assembly, timing of budget. Like I said earlier, we typically get our budget in June. They're telling us now we probably won't hear about state subsidies until August. So good luck. So that's the conversations I'm having. And Antonio raises a good point, and Antonio and I work together. One of the things we used to always talk about is, he always asked me, what's keeping you up at night? And always be asking your supervisor, what's on your mind? What's keeping you up at night? What's the stressors? Particularly for those of you today who are looking to move up, you aspire to be into these positions. It's really going to stretch you by asking those questions of, I wasn't even thinking about that. Or, today I had to figure out how much is it going to cost for us to be running antibody tests on campus in the fall. I don't know. I don't come up through health services, but I have the people who can help me do that. But that would have been a conversation my staff and I would have had today in regards to, hey, what's stressing you out today? Well, can we do antibody tests? How much is it going to cost? Do we have the right equipment? That's not a programming, student development kind of question, but that's actually what's on my mind today. And in addition to my president worrying about budget, fiscal stewardship and stuff like that.
I think definitely understanding the business of higher education is a skill set that folks have to develop as you're moving up, whether you're going to be controlling all of the money or you need to understand how it works. So we're in the last couple of minutes. Some words for the people from both of you, some final words for them.
I'll go. breathe, take self-care, whatever that means for you. So I hope to the best of all of our ability, I'm trying to tell my staff, don't work this weekend, stay off computers. Know that WebEx and Zoom fatigue is real. And know that there's another side of this, and what does that look like, and what role can we all play in terms of student affairs being a part of that conversation of higher education, and what do we look like on the other side of this. Things are going to be different, but I think it's starting today. Just on my agenda with my directors this morning, one of the line items on the agenda was expectations for the fall for ourselves and our students. Let's start having this conversation of what's going to be different, how that's going to look different, and really do that. And like I said, the last thing I would say is to the best of people's ability, delegate. If you're in a role who can, so that you can assume and take on different responsibilities. I also think now is a really good time. Ask your supervisors and ask your VP. I would love right now to spend some time with some of my staff who are in entry-level positions or other positions to ask me, what was this like? I would like that time because it's going to help me reflect. I have been journaling. But I think that I would actually love that conversation right now, because maybe it's not so COVID related, because most of my meetings right now are COVID-19 related, but to help your growth, your development, your journey, I would welcome the opportunity to talk to some people in regards to what this has been like in navigating this. So.
Yeah, I love that, spending time with staff at all levels to really have conversations and be candid and share. Antonio, I'm a man of faith, and in my faith tradition, there's a passage that says the race isn't given to the swift or the strong, but the one who endures to the end. This is a marathon that we are in, and with a rapidly changing environment that might cause us to rise up to want to sprint, we need to understand that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we have to be in it for the long haul, and do what you need to do to not only prepare, but sustain the marathon. And so that may look like self-care, that may look like some new opportunities for professional development, that may look like figuring out whether or not this is the right opportunity for you at this time, and whether you still want to be situated in this academic context we call student affairs. Whatever that looks like for you, be forthright with yourself about what is valuable to help you sustain the marathon, because we do have headwinds ahead of us, but I am confident that we will rise, and that we will break out of our cocoon as the big, beautiful butterfly that we want to be. It will take time. And it will take patience, and it will take perseverance, but I think we're ready for the challenge, as long as we take care of ourselves and take care of each other.
Awesome. Well, I can't add more to that. I want to thank both of you for joining me for this conversation, and I'm sure for those of you who've been watching along with us, I hope it was informative and fulfilling for you, as it has been for me. You stay connected to the deep end. You can join more conversations like this. What started as one conversation has now turned into a request for more series. And so I've got more conversations lined up with Chief Student Affairs officers. Some more learning has happened. So when a good thing happens, you just keep going with it, all right? Like this page on the deep end and stay connected to more events like this. This is Antonio, and I'll see you soon. Bye.